Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Bolt Report channel. Michael, it is playoff season. The playoffs are here. We are ready to go for the ninth consecutive season. The Lightning have made the playoffs. Once again, it's tied for the longest active streak in the NHL with the Colorado Avalanche. But we're here to talk about your Tampa Bay Lightning. Will be taking on the Montreal Canadiens in round one. A big matchup to start things off. Lots to look forward to. But first and foremost, before we get into all of the things to break down in this series, Michael, how you doing, my friend?
I'm doing well. We were fortunate this year to be able to cover the Lightning more in depth, as you guys have been able to see throughout our various social media channels. Uh, Game 82 was very interesting, but the switch flip that you're going to see from Game 82 of the regular season and Game 1 of the playoffs, it's going to be absolutely insane. I can't wait to get started.
It's been kind of Lightning's MO for the last couple of years is just coast into the to the postseason and then get ready to go. But I think this year was better than in years past at the very least, with the exception of that last game of the season. But we're going to focus on the playoffs. All right, so coming up in this video, we're going to break down the upcoming schedule for the Bolts and how that is going to look. We'll take a look at some key difference makers that can really change this series for the Lightning. We'll take a look at some key statistics. We'll give you our predictions, all that and more coming up right now here on this series preview. And Michael, let's get started with that schedule for the Bolts, released very late last night by the NHL. But here's how it looks for the Bolts. They will start in round one on Sunday, April 19th against the Canadiens. That game at 5:45 p.m. Eastern, and they are starting over here in Tampa. Of course, Lightning have home ice for round one. Game two will be on Tuesday. That game at 7:30 p.m. Eastern. That is April 21st. And then you will have game three on Friday. That game in Montreal at 7 p.m. Eastern on April the 24th. And then April the 26th, you will have game four at 7 p.m. Eastern, again in Montreal. Then back to Tampa Bay, that game on the 29th. That game time to be determined. And then on May 1st, we'll have game three in Montreal. And then game seven, if needed, would be on the 3rd, May 3rd. And again, the time to be determined. So the two weird things with this schedule to note is the 2 days off between game two and three, and then game four and five. You have that 2 day break instead of the traditional 1 day break between each game. But Michael, very least, there's no back to backs. You do an extra day of rest, kind of nice. A little weird that the NHL did this, but we all know the NHL is very weird when it comes to their scheduling.
Just a very weird league in general, but honestly, I'm okay with those breaks. Like the Lightning have very much embraced the 2 day break that they've had between the end of the regular season and the playoffs. And you're not going to get those types of breaks later in the playoffs if you make it that far. So to be able to have a couple extra days, rest, recover, this hopefully and potentially might benefit somebody like a Pontus Holmberg from coming back in the first round that hasn't officially been ruled out. I know John Cooper was a little iffy and said he might have an update on Holmberg or Hedman in the coming days. But for the most part, while it does seem like those guys are going to be out in round one, it gives them a couple extra days to potentially come back and be a difference maker at the end of the series.
That would be huge if they can get those guys back. Now, of course, Victor Hedman, who is out due to personal reasons right now, we don't know why. We don't know the extent. I don't expect him to be back in round one. Quite frankly, I don't know if he's going to be back at all this season. I hope he is. I hope he's back soon. And whatever's going on, we wish him the best of luck. But it's just unfortunately we don't know right now. And we know Michael Cooper in the regular season is sometimes difficult to read when it comes to injuries. You start talking about the playoffs, you really never know what you're going to get out of
Mhm.
him when
Yeah.
it comes to injuries. But the good news is the lines that we saw for the first practice for the Lightning at the end of the regular season here is the. It's hard to even say this because Lightning have been so banged up all year. In fact, they only had one player reach 82 games played, which was of course Yanni Gord. Gensel would have got it too, but he took the night off in game 82. it was the most healthy lineup that the Lightning have had. And it's still considerably banged up, but at least a lot of guys coming back. One of those guys, Dominic James, he seems to be getting close to being back too as well. Crozier recently has gotten back into the lineup. So they're getting healthy, which you have to be when it comes to the postseason.
Yeah, absolutely. And as you had said, like we laughed about it, but it's true. Like this team has not been healthy at all this season. Whether it was, I believe Nick Paul started the year injured, and that allowed guys like Dominic James to get opportunities early in the year. Connor Geeky was on the opening night roster. Scott Sabrin played early in the season. Jack Finley, Curtis Douglas, guys that are no longer on the team were on the team to start the year. And now we get to a point where everybody's healthy-ish, and you have to make lineup decisions now where you didn't really have to throughout the season. I think that is one of the more intriguing parts of the fact that the playoffs are starting is you have to make lineup decisions based on who's now available rather than who's unavailable. So going to be really interesting to see how that goes. Again, the two notable omissions in the practice today were Holmberg and Hedman, and apparently we're going to get some news on them maybe after game one, maybe before game one. John Cooper was very, uh, we'll wait and see, and we'll give you some news in a couple days. So besides them, everybody else seems to be healthy.
All right, let's take a look at the previous matches between these two teams. They've played four different times in the regular season, twice in Montreal, twice in Tampa. Game one in Montreal, the Lightning took by a final score of 6-1 on December 9th of 2025. Big win for the Bolts, but in game two it was a much closer game. The Lightning won in a shootout. That game on December 28th of 2025, 5-4 was your final score. In game three, the Lightning lost to the Canadiens by a final score of 4-1. That game was on March 31st of 2026. And then on April 9th, you had the Lightning lose to the Canadiens by a final score of 2-1. Was very close to the end of the regular season. Remember, the Lightning tied that game up late, but then gave up a goal to Montreal in the next couple of seconds, right back to them, and they come away with the win. So a series split between these two teams in their four games of regular season. But again, you have to take it with a grain of salt because the playoffs are very different from the regular season. And as we just talked about, these two teams look very different from when they did at the start of the regular season.
Yeah, you look at the first two games, and the Lightning, not only won, but they took that combined score advantage pretty well. Like they outscored the Canadians 10-5. And then the next two games, Montreal outscored them 6-2. Like it's very, each game was different. We were both at the December 28th game. Montreal came back from 4-1 down, and the Lightning ended up winning. Well, there's no shootouts in the playoffs. You look at that last game of the season, the Lightning clawed their way back to tie it and then immediately surrendered the lead. So this could have easily been 3-1 in either direction for the team's matchup. But as you said, doesn't really matter. Like it's nice to see some people have success against the Canadians or success against the Lightning for their own sake. But as far as what it does, like the fact that Andre Vasilevsky had a worse save percentage and a worse record than Jonas Johansson against the Canadians this year, doesn't really matter because we're going to be seeing Andre Vasilevsky the entire time. So he's playoff Andre Vasilevsky. He's the best playoff goalie in the world right now. We're gonna have to see what happens, but again, this is a very different environment than the regular season.
Different environment is a great word because playoff atmosphere, especially in Montreal, is something to behold. And I'm sure there's going to be a lot of Montreal fans down in Tampa. Unfortunately, hopefully, Lightning fans will show up and rock the barn for game one. All right, let's take a look at how these two teams stack up on the statistics side of things. A pretty favorite for the Lightning here when it comes to the stats. Power play, Montreal's got the better power play percentage at 23.1%. Tampa at 20.7%. Penalty kill, Lightning 82.6%. They are top of the league all year long. Montreal at 78.2%. Goals for per game, Lightning 3.49. They were really good in that department. Montreal 3.40, not too far behind, but the Lightning a tad better. And goals against, Michael, this is probably perhaps the biggest difference between these two teams in the course of the regular season. Lightning 2.79 and the Montreal Canadiens 3.06. So maybe something there. And that was a big thing for the Bolts this season, was improving their 5-on-5 and being better defensively. They did that by a lot this year, and that could be something to look out for in this series, especially one that I consider might be pretty close.
Yeah, absolutely. And the Lightning were top five in both goals for and goals against. And, Montreal happened to score more goals than the Lightning did, but they were middle of the pack when it came to goals against. And this is not just 5-on-5, this is all situations. But you see the dichotomy of both of these teams can score. One of them has been far better, maybe not necessarily defensively leaps and bounds, but definitely goaltending. Jakub has been very good for Montreal this year. But Andre Vasilevsky, again, is probably going to win the Vezina. Like, this is a bounce back season for Vasilevsky, which is weird to say because it seemed like he was great last year too, and the year before that, and the year before that. You know what I'm saying. But I think that when you look at the Lightning, the one stat that you brought up, which was very interesting, was the penalty kill. 82.6, is that the number? It was 82 point something.
82.6, yes.
Oh, okay. I got it right on right on the nose. But best penalty kill in the league. I can't remember that many like shorthanded goals. They had a decent amount of opportunities, but when you think of a really good penalty kill, you think of one that not only stops their opponent, but also pots a couple of shorthanded goals as well. The Lightning didn't really do that this season. They had a couple, but it's not like the Blake Coleman, Barclay Goodrow penalty kill where it seemed like they were getting like four shorthanded opportunities every single penalty kill. Just a very steady, reliable, get that puck out of the zone and change and win faceoffs. Faceoffs were a big problem for the Lightning this year, but it seems like on the penalty kill they did more than enough to make sure that they were able to kill those penalties off. So Montreal again has a really good power play. The Lightning, I believe that they finished the season like 1 for 31 on the power play, which was horrible to end the year. Like they couldn't generate anything. But again, we're in the playoffs, and playoffs are a different animal. So we'll see. Maybe they go 3 for 3 in that first game.
The power play has been really weird this year. At certain times, you would say, "Oh, this power play is fantastic. It looks even better than it did last year." And then at other times, you would say, "What on earth are we doing out here with the man advantage?
Hmm.
We don't want to decline these power plays." Now, typically, I know this has been kind of disproven a little bit, but you do see the whistles slowly start to go away in the postseason. Those opportunities are definitely more amplified when you come to these games. So we'll see how things play out. The Lightning are one of the most penalized teams in the NHL. And that actually leads me into our next segment, Michael, in our keys to the series, because there's a couple of things the Lightning have to do in this series if they want to come away with a win. And the first one is stay out of the box. Again, as I mentioned, the Lightning, one of the most penalized teams in the NHL. You don't want to give Montreal all the power play chances. Number two is the power play. We just talked about it. Power play was good and bad, mostly struggled. They've got to capitalize on their chances. And number three is carrying momentum. Now, what do I mean by that one? Michael, Montreal is a young team, especially with a guy like Marty St. Louis at the helm, who's done a fantastic job over there with the Canadiens this year. But they're a young team. They've got a lot of energy, and when they get momentum, they tend to run with it. You do not want to give this team an opportunity to get back into games. If they can pick up momentum and start to run away, things are going to be very difficult for the Lightning. And that basically means getting off to good starts, scoring quickly after a goal against, or even just having a good shift to kill some of their momentum. Whatever you can do to not let Montreal really start to snowball and move it downhill. Because if they do, they're going to be a very difficult opponent for the Bolts, I think, in this series.
Yeah, so I'll hit on two of those. The first one being the one that you just mentioned, momentum. When you especially get scored on, because it's going to happen sometimes in the playoffs, John Cooper is very much going to use that bottom six as the catalyst for the next shift. You know, those guys are fighting for everything. That third line, while it might not have Pontus Holmberg, maybe it has Dominic James, maybe it has Nick Paul on it. Those guys are tenacious. They forecheck really well. They are going to make a very difficult life for the Montreal Canadiens, even after the Canadiens got themselves a goal. And then the penalties, I didn't bring this up to John Cooper. It's one of the things that I wish I would have done during the last game of the season. Um, Jake, how many penalties since March 1st does Charles Edward Dustu have?
I'm gonna go with 15.
It's 12. So he took 12 minor penalties. That's tied for the most in the NHL since March 1st. It's not great. Like this is a guy who he's been a revelation this season on the blue line. He's never been in that situation. Like he's won overseas, I get all that. He's never been in the situation of the NHL playoffs. Sticks are gripped a little bit tighter. I understand the refs might not call as many penalties, but they still do call penalties. And this is a guy that has taken a lot of penalties recently. So the Lightning are gonna, I know we talked about them having a good penalty kill. They're gonna need to stay out of the box because Montreal has a great power play. And this guy specifically needs to stay out of the box because he's been taking penalties left and right. And if he continues to take penalties, the Lightning are going to be in trouble.
Yeah, and you can have a good penalty all you want, but eventually one's going to go in, and those can be the difference
Mhm.
makers in series, especially in the postseason. So you have to stay out of the box. And while Destu has been one of the worst when it comes to taking penalties, especially as of late, it goes for the whole team because Lightning have been a
Yep.
very penalized team. Now, a lot of that has been, just between the games, between the Florida Panthers.
Yep.
Take those out, they might drop a little bit, and that will change as well. But don't let the emotions get the best of you in this series because you don't want to find yourself in the box, putting yourself at a disadvantage, especially in games that are in Montreal where the fans can start getting rowdy after a goal. And again, the momentum start to pick up for the Canadiens.
Hmm.
All right, every series has their difference makers, Michael. We've already kind of mentioned a couple that could be potential difference makers in this series. We're going to focus on two players that we think could really change how this series goes for the Lightning. I went with Yanni Gourde, Michael, who has come back with the Lightning after being with Seattle for a couple of years. A fan favorite and such a hard worker. And I think they're going to need a guy like that in this series against Montreal, who's a little more gritty and well, not gritty, but fast pace and momentum driven. A guy like Gord can really shut that down and try to slow things down against Montreal. Gord, 9 goals, 19 assists for 28 points this season. And then you, Michael, went with Dominic James, 7 goals, 8 assists for 15 total points this year. He has been shot out of a cannon. He reminds me a lot of guys like Ross Colton, someone that came up from the Syracuse Crunch, has been fantastic offensively. And we know what guys like Ross Colton did in the Stanley Cup playoffs for the Lightning.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a pretty apt comparison, I think. Not necessarily in play style, but just the hunger. They want it. Those two guys, and you saw it from his debut against Chicago. Like he was a guy that really, really excelled, and unfortunately, got hurt in game 58 of the season and couldn't make it back for the rest of the regular season. He's been on the ice for the practice sessions going into the playoffs, centering the fourth line, which I thought was interesting. I'm not the coach. I'm not a hockey expert. I thought he would have paired very well with that third line. Yanni Gourde and Zemgus Girgensons. James is a guy that is a pretty good forechecker. He's a pretty good scorer. We saw him get 4 point or 3 points in his last 4 games before getting injured. This is a guy who there's going to be growing pains, obviously, with him being a young kid, getting, time in the NHL. We saw it where he would have these scoreless droughts, and these growing pains. But you talk about getting shot out of a cannon to start his career. He's going to get shot out of a cannon to start the playoffs, whether no matter what line he's on. So he can play anywhere. He's been versatile. He was at second line center sometimes this year. He was at third line winger. He was at fourth line center. This is a guy that is very, very talented. And I know I mentioned earlier that the Lightning really struggled with faceoffs. I believe he was the leader in faceoff percentage. If not, he was pretty close. You know, he was above 50%, which if he's the only guy above 50%, the Lightning have major problems. But and of course now I'm looking this up on the fly, which is never good to do. Nick Paul led the team in faceoff percentage, and James was second among all qualified guys that are still there. So a pretty, pretty versatile player that I think could do a lot for the Lightning in the playoffs.
This is a team too that really believes in itself. It believes in the guys around them all year. When we were in those post media scrums, they talked about how they never have any panic and they believe in each other. And Dominic James has been fantastic. He's been one of those guys that's really shown up and been able to give this team that reason to believe in
Yep.
games, even when they are down. He's been fantastic. So much fun to watch. I'm very much looking forward to what he can do in the postseason. All right, Michael, it is time for our predictions. One of my favorite parts of the show because we always like to have a little bit of fun. And you could probably, if you've been watching the channel for a while, know what we're going to say in these predictions. If you just look at who we cover, you probably know what we're going to say for these predictions. But we're going to have some
Hmm.
fun with it. Also, let us know in the comments down below your predictions, not just for the series. We want to hear your MVP, your unsung hero, your keys to the series win, biggest concern, and then, of course, your series prediction. Drop it down below. Let us know. We'd love to hear what you guys have to say as always. But, Michael, I'll let you start things off here. Your series prediction for the Bolts and Canadians.
Make me go first. I have the Lightning five. I know these two teams are very close. They tied in standing points, and the Lightning edged out on regulation and overtime victories. But this is going to be a 5 game war. We've seen a lot of competitive 4 or 5 game series. We've seen a lot of uncompetitive 7 game series as well. I think this is going to take a chunk out of the Lightning, but this is a team that has had a couple of years of, uh, I would say, no luck after a couple of years of all the luck. So eventually things need to balance back out. You know, this is if they get one more bounce, if they get each game, if they get one more stick in the lane that is able to disrupt a golden opportunity, if they're able to hone in their defensive structure, I think the Lightning could, again, not make quick work out of the Canadians in terms of the types of games that you're going to see, but as far as the amount of games, I think that they could find a way to surprise a lot of people.
I would love the Lightning to get it done in 5 games. That would be fantastic. With that said, my prediction for the Lightning and Montreal Canadiens, Lightning in four. All right, that's going to do it for us in this. No, I'm kidding. As much as I would love a sweep, I don't know how realistic that may be against a very good Montreal team.
Mhm.
So my prediction for this series is going to be Lightning in seven. I'm going 7 games here. It may be a little underselling the Bolts, but I don't I buy into Montreal. I really do. They're a young team. Now they don't have as much playoff experience as Tampa, which could go in their
Mhm.
favor, but just the way this team plays, the way things went in the regular season, I know I said don't put too much stock into that, but you have to take a little bit of stock from it. I think it's going to be a long series. I think it's going to be back and forth. I think it's going to be tough for the Bolts. I think they drew one of the tougher round one matchups in the NHL playoffs. That's just how the Eastern Conference and Atlantic Division were built. So that's really unfortunate for the Lightning. But I think this is going to be a long series. Could they do it earlier? Absolutely. They're one of the heavy favorites according to a lot of the betting sites right now. So only time will tell. But I'm going to go Lightning in seven. I think they can definitely win this series, especially when it comes to their playoff experience. I think it's going to help give them the edge in this one. But I don't think it's going to be easy.
Does this isn't necessarily, and we've talked about it at the end of each regular season or each playoffs, of course, but there's a creeping thing of the Lightning have only won one playoff home game since the 2022 Cup Finals. Is that a worry at all?
I don't know if worry is the right word, especially considering I will be in attendance for game one. So they better be winning more at home. For this round, I'm going to say it is a little bit because I think home ice advantage in Montreal is a very real thing. As much as I
Mhm,
love Tampa and what this city has done with this franchise and the great games that they bring and the game presentation and the fans and all that stuff, Montreal's a different beast. They've been
mhm.
around for a long time. Those fans love their team, and you're really going to need to take advantage of those games at home. And home ice is a real thing. Now, if you ask this to John Cooper, I'm sure he would tell you absolutely not. This team is going to play their best, and they're not worried at all whether it's home or away. And that's how they've been the last couple of years, as you just kind of brought up. But I would like to see them definitely take advantage at home. At least win the first game to carry that momentum again.
Well, end of the year last year, Andre Vasilevsky was like, "What are we doing?" Like I think he said we were like 1-9 or 1-10 in our last like 11 home games. It's like he used like expletives, which is very unlike Andre Vasilevsky. But he's like, we're not playing well at home in the playoffs, and we need to do better for our fans. They deserve better than this. So I wonder if that's a conversation they're going to have. And you think back to the last two t times the last time these two teams faced in the playoffs, the Lightning went undefeated. They won the Stanley Cup at home. But again, that's a very different roster than what you're seeing right now. So
Very.
I wonder what that leadership group is going to look like. Because again, not only is it a very different roster, but you don't have your captain. So I'm interested to see how this whole thing plays out.
Speaking of that, Michael, I want to bring this up. I don't know if you have this stat pulled up in front of you, but you told me something very interesting earlier today.
Yes.
Do you have this stat that you can share with us?
Yeah, so last decade, the Lightning have made the playoffs 10 times. They have gone into the playoffs three times without their captain. So Stamkos was injured in 2016, came back for the final game. Stamkos was injured again in 2020, came back for that magical shift. And we're not going to have Hedman this time around. So just a very odd set of circumstances where they don't have their leader three times. But hey, those other two times they made it to game seven of the conference final and then won the Stanley Cup.
I
So,
was just going to say, so maybe this is a good thing for the
yeah,
team going into the season.
but
Hopefully,
we'd love to have Hetty back eventually.
yes, hopefully Hedman will be back very, very soon, and the Lightning will at least be off to a good start when he returns, and it's only going
Yep.
to make things better. All right, that's going to do it for us in this episode. Thank you so much to everybody for tuning in with us once again. Don't forget, follow us on social media at Bolt Report _TB for all of your playoff coverage. Hopefully, we'll be at some of the games once again. Even if we're not, we'll be covering the Lightning all throughout the playoffs. So follow us on social media, like and subscribe right here on YouTube. And that's going to do it for this episode. Thank you so much for tuning in. We'll see you all in the next one. Go Bolts.